I wonder, what's the best way to manage change? And is it a must?
Yeah, I really don't think organizations have a choice at the moment. But as I was saying in my presentation, I mean, I think there's two things that are really important about managing change. The first is to try and get beyond pure management of it and into really driving the change agenda. I think if organizations approach it from the perspective of there are some things happening out there, how am I going to respond? You're on the back foot already. I think the conversation needs to start with there's some things happening out there. Now, what am I proactively going to do to make these changes exactly what I want for my own profitability, for the sorts of change that we want to see, for the sorts of social issues that we want to affect? I think we've got to be really proactive about it.
Not waiting for something to happen, right?
Yeah, exactly. Get on the front foot and really lead it as much as possible. And in IT in particular, where we're inventing so many of the things that are going to radically change the world, it's our conversation to own, I think. And the great ICT companies are doing that. The second thing I'd say is we need to make sure our approach is comprehensive. So there are lots of different tools we can use to make change happen, and I think we need to deploy all of them. We need to build structures, we need to change habits, we need to tell stories, we need to build identities, and we need to put incentives in place. Every tool we have at our disposal, I think we need to use them all if we're going to really make change happen and then make change permanent.
Are companies aware of the risks for not making that change?
I think there's a general understanding that it's risky to not change. One of the things that's interesting is there are plenty of high-profile examples of where the whole world knew change was happening, but the companies that most affected decided not to do anything. And I think of the rise of, say, peer-to-peer music sharing, and like Napster and downloads of music and online entertainment. And you can go back to 1999, 2000, 2001 with Sony as the world's largest entertainment company standing up saying, we will resist online music as much as we possibly can. And the whole world knew the change was happening, but the companies right at the center of it did everything they could to resist it. And I think there's a danger sometimes that organizations, particularly if they're the ones most affected, would rather resist it than try to drive the agenda. And that's the biggest risk, I think, that particularly if the change challenges your business model. I mean, there was talk today of the falling costs of telephone calls and how that's reducing revenue for telecommunications companies. And it was great to hear in the room, there wasn't a, let's do what we can to keep prices high. There was a, okay, what does this mean for our business model and how can we find new ways to turn this into an opportunity? And that's a great sign, I think.
Which companies are the best ones going rhythm with the change?
I think there's different examples in different industries of companies that are highly innovative. I think in ICT, I think there's obviously some very high-profile examples of companies like, say, the way Apple has driven the design agenda, and Samsung now, I think, are probably even almost surpassing Apple as driving the design agenda. I think there's a lot of smaller providers who have been quick to pick up on the software as a service online kind of trends. I mean, there's a company called Atlassian that has done a phenomenal job of seeing what's happening in the social media space and then asking how can we apply this to enterprise. And then obviously outside of IT, that there's innovative companies in all fields. I mean, I think what's most interesting is that they all share something in common. The innovative companies that get it right. And what they all share in common is a willingness to challenge their own beliefs and assumptions about what's possible. And that, regardless of what industry you're in, I think is the hallmark of an innovative company.
In ChangeLabs, what's your strategy in getting contact with the companies?
As in clients for So we have two strategies for getting contact with companies. One is what we call thought leadership. And we see this a little bit in IT at the moment, and say this has been one of IBM's core strategies, is we have a fundamental belief that if we commit to the most exciting research, the most innovative approach to doing things, the most broad-based research approach, then people will come to us. And that's why we do things like come to conferences, and the more we speak about it, the more we write about it, the better. And our second approach has been to identify, and this is just our personal philosophy, it's to identify the things in the world we're most passionate about, whether they be IT, social change, health, financial education. Our strategy is to identify the areas that we're most personally passionate about, make a hit list of the people we would in our wildest dreams love to partner with, and then kick down their doors until they agree to work with us. So that's been our approach.
You mentioned about social media and its popularity right now. How do you see its future?
Bigger and more integrated, I think.
Bigger and more integrated.
Yeah.
Integrated in which ways?
I think at the moment social media is still considered by many people, not by all, but by many people, like a web address. Like I go to Facebook and I do my social media. I go to Twitter and I do my social media. But more and more the combination of mobility, connectivity, and kind of smart apps that all talk to each other is that our social media is becoming integrated in the way we live. So an app like Foursquare, which has taken off in many parts of the world, is this idea of social media as an integrated part of my life. When I go to my favorite cafe, I'm going to check in to that cafe and be able to see which other ones of my friends have been there or are coming there. That when I go to a conference, the conference has a hashtag, and everyone at the conference is going to be able to converse with each other via social media. It's taking it away from being somewhere that you go online and into an integral part of how I experience the world. And I think that's going to make it more accessible, but it's also going to make it more impactful. I think it's going to have a bigger impact on the world when it's integrated. And I think one of the areas where we're not yet seeing its full impact is in politics. I mean, there's been some parts of the world, if you look at, say, the Arab Spring, obviously a lot was written about the role of social media in that forum. But I think in many democratic nations, governments and politicians need to use social media more to connect with citizens and connect with their people, and we're only just starting to see that happen in a meaningful way now.
Like I think Obama tested.
Yeah, Obama was one of the first to kind of dip his feet in a big way, and you know, interestingly, we're starting to see some government departments in different parts of the world try to have closer and more real-time relationships, like the Toronto Transit Authority now use social media to try and connect with regular travelers to understand bottlenecks in the system and how people are experiencing travel in real time. And I think if government is meant to be service delivery, then having a tool like social media that lets you connect in real time to the people using your service is going to be revolutionary. But we're right at the start of that journey now. So as I said in my presentation today, I think social media will be as important as the printing press was in changing the way humans organize our world and communicate with each other. I think it's properly revolutionary. And the next 10 years is going to be really exciting in that regard, I think.
In which ways?
Well, there's simple ways and there's complex ways. On a simple level, it's breaking down geographical boundaries. It's facilitating multicultural connection. It's bringing people closer together, and it's making communicating easier. I think on a more profound level, and this will probably take longer, it's taking power out of the hands of institutions and putting it in the hands of individuals. The expression we use is the democratization of knowledge and the democratization of information. If you go back historically, information was controlled by the institutions that were large enough to control infrastructure for communication. You know, I mean, the concept of mass media, which is a 20th century invention.
Everything were all tied together.
Exactly. I mean, you had to be rich enough and big enough to own broadcasting satellites and newspaper means of production to communicate. Now everyone can publish, everyone can share their thoughts with the world, and that alters the power balance in a really major way. And I think the recent political uprising in Egypt really did begin to show just how much, when people can organize spontaneously, it can be a vehicle to challenge the dominant regime. Now, I'm not saying social media created the revolution in Egypt, and I have a degree in political science and know that's not true. But in terms of providing an infrastructure that allows that to happen, I think it will be very impactful.
Gives people the tool, right?
Gives people the tool, exactly. And giving people the right tools to do what they've always wanted to do is the sort of thing that can quite genuinely change the world, I think.
Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure, thank you.